Morning. Today is the 25th day of Iyar on the Jewish calendar, 41st day of the Omer. This week we read the Torah portion of Bamidbar, the first Torah portion in the fourth book of the Torah, commonly known as the Book of Numbers. And Bamidbar means in the desert, and a lot of the narrative of the historical narrative that's in this fourth book of the Torah goes through some of the events that happened during the Jewish journey in the desert, during the 40 years they traveled from Egypt to the Promised Land. And in this first Torah portion, God tells Moses to take a census. And in other words, to be personally engaged in counting, not just get numbers reported back to him, but actually be engaged in the counting. When it comes to counting the Levite tribe, it seems to look a little more personal. So where he personally has to go, and he's part of the Levites, to go and get all the numbers, men, women, children, babies, and the Talmud tells us that Moses turned to God and said, how do you expect me to do this? Aside from the fact that it's labor intensive, and I don't think that was the problem that's presented is there's just basic human privacy and decency. Am I going to go into everyone's tents to personally ascertain the numbers? And the Talmud says, God said to him, don't worry about it. You go to each tent, and there will be a miraculous voice from heaven that will tell you, in other words, I'll give you the verified number. You can trust my numbers. The voice will come forward. This many adults, this many children, this many men, this many women in the tent. And commentaries ask if it was going to come, the number was going to come from God. Moses could have saved some effort and just sat in his own tent and just got the tabulations coming. God will tell him exactly what it is if it's going to be this miraculous type of accounting. And an answer, which is an insight into a much more general approach we have to seeing our place in the universe and our interplay between our efforts and God's efforts, and God giving us a more divine push and assistance, is that elemental to a Jewish understanding of our place in the world is that we have to make an effort. Even if we see, and correctly so, if we see that God working through us, and we see God's blessings coming through us, and we see what we accomplish as being God accomplishing, it is up to us to do the work. If we feel that we're just not going to be able to do it all on our own, well, step up to the plate and let's do what we can. Let's go to the tents. And since this is God's work, then it's up to God, and we trust in God that somehow it will get done. In the language of the Mishnah, in the Talmud, it says, the language is, Lo alecha malacha ligmar, that it's not up to you to complete the work. But together with that, it's ein ata ben chayrin lehibot mimena. You do not have the freedom to shirk the work. You can't say, well, listen, I don't see how I'm going to get this to the goal line, so I'm not even going to start. That is exactly what life is not about. We look, we see an objective, we see a call, we see a need, we see a responsibility. Get started. Do the work. And with a trust in God, that in our day, there's no heavenly voice going to come out and give you the information you need. But I think if we all look at our own lives, we see God's help and God's assistance and that divine hand, that divine voice that helps us to the goal line. But we've got to start with what we can do and look at it and say, not find excuses not to start because I don't see how I'm going to finish. There's a need, there's a responsibility, the world needs something, get going. Wish you a great day, and a day with good news, continued good news, because we're seeing good news already. able to get back to a world where we can be that much more functional to be who God creates us to be.